This video is going to look at responding to a question relating to our first dot point on contemporary Aboriginal spiritualities, where students learn to discuss how Aboriginal spirituality is determined by the dreaming. So discuss means to provide points for and or against. How means in what ways, and these are the ways that the Board of Studies wants us to focus on. These particular ways that are evident of Aboriginal spirituality are going to show us how Aboriginal spirituality is defined or determined by the dreaming. The focus of this question is going to be on ceremonial life. So if we have a look at the question, it says, analyse the relationship between ceremonial life and the dreaming in contemporary Aboriginal spiritualities. So to analyse means to identify components and the relationship among them, draw them out and relate implications. So why are we asked to analyse when the dot point states that we are going to learn to discuss? If we have a look at page 33 of your syllabus, you'll see that the outcomes that are covered have many different HSC verbs that can be thrown at you in any question, whether it's question 11 or section 2 or section 3. So analyse the relationship. That term in the question, the relationship, links back to the dot point that the spirituality of which ceremonial life is a part is determined by the dreaming. Ceremonial life is one of the 4 characteristics of religion, and therefore it's the emphasis of the question. There's some silent expectations of the question. You need to also be able to link to the other 3 characteristics, belief and believers, sacred texts and ethics, to the ways in which ceremonies utilise these aspects to show that, that they're determined by the dreaming. And we know from our studies in Year 11 that the dreaming determines all aspects of Aboriginal life. So that links back to our dot point about kinship, ceremonial life and obligations to the land and people. At contemporary, it just simply means as they exist today, what we have knowledge about. This is a sample answer. I've just broken it up into the ideal structure. So we have our intro sentence to address the question, and we can see right up all aspects of Aboriginal ceremonial life are derived from the dreaming. Key terms of dreaming and ceremonial life in our detail sentence. So here we next have our examples, which are shown in green, and you can see how these examples link to the other 3 characteristics of religion. We've got art and stories, which relate to sacred texts, law and tradition, right and wrong, relates to ethics, and some examples of ceremonies. And the beliefs is the dreaming itself. The analysis, which should form the bulk of your response, is how these different aspects are utilised in ceremonies and how they're connected to the dreaming. And finally, there's the link down the bottom. And that really addresses that keyword in the question. It's talking about today what we have knowledge of, and really it kind of leads into our next dot point about dispossession. Just wanted to highlight as well some of those key terms, key terms that need to be in your response. I don't know if I've highlighted all of them, but so now it's your turn. This question 11 is from the 2010 HSC, and it includes a quote. Dream country is belonging. Every person has a place in the world in which they are needed and in which they are healthy. Describe the ways in which Aboriginal spirituality is closely linked to belonging to country. And by the word country, we're not talking about a country as in Australia or America, of course. We're talking about the land to which an Aboriginal person belongs and their place of dreaming. We'll talk a little bit more about this thing, their place of dreaming, a little bit later. So, whenever you're given a quote, you need to refer to it in your response. While this question doesn't ask you to refer to the quote, it is a given. So to describe means to provide characteristics and features of. The ways means how, and the ways in which the Board of Studies want you to focus on is kinship, ceremonial life, obligations to land and people. Aboriginal spirituality refers to the dreaming. This word belonging, this is basically the limits to the question. Otherwise, you could write a whole heap of stuff about the dreaming, but you're specifically asked about which aspects of the dreaming, which aspects of kinship, ceremonial life, obligations to land and people, specifically relate to belonging to country. So from kinship, ceremonial life, and obligations to land and people, you've got to find aspects of these three areas of study that are foundational to this sense of belonging to land or to country. From these three aspects, you could look at sacred sites, ceremonies, give two examples, ritual estate, obligations to land and people, but you have to link them to belonging. Have a think about totems, ancestral beings. How are they linked to country? Think about kinship, inextricable link, closely connected to, one cannot exist without the other, integral to. And belonging to country. If we have a look down here, this term country, to refer to land to which they belong and their place of dreaming. Dreaming is specific to a given area of land because the landforms, the flora, the fauna are different in a particular area of land. So, for example, a rainforest in northern Queensland is not going to have the same dreaming stories as the Western Australian deserts, and therefore the dreaming about how those aspects of landforms, flora and fauna came into being are going to be different. If you're born into that particular area, you have a different set of obligations to the land and to the people in your kinship group. You have a different totem, obviously, that's specific to that area of land. To answer this question, use the ideal paragraph structure. Incorporate explicit reference or paraphrase the quote twice. Use two examples, maybe of ceremonies or of sacred sites or of kinship or of obligations to land and people. Bring in some aspect of each of the three dot points and try your best not to write more than 17 lines. And now it's time to get started.